Hey there! Did you know Baker's always gives you savings and rewards on top of our lower-than-low prices? And when you download the Baker's app, you'll enjoy over $500 in savings every week with digital coupons. And don't forget fuel points to help you save up to $1 per gallon at the pump. Want to save even more? With a Boost membership, you'll get double fuel points and free delivery. So shop and save big at Baker's today. Baker's, fresh for everyone. Savings may vary by state. Restrictions apply. See site for details.
This podcast is made possible through donations from listeners like you and our partners at Goalie Ashwa Gummies. You can find them at goalie.com. Use promo code The Show Up Dad Foundation to get 10% off your order. Xendurance Active Wellness and Sports Nutrition. Their products are designed to maximize your health. At Xendurance, they strive to support and have a positive impact on the wellness of every hardworking dad. Use my code The Show Up Dad and get 10% off your next purchase. For more info, go to www.xendurance.com. Tall Man Equipment, standing taller than the rest of the competition in lineman tools since 1952. Give them a follow at www.tallmanequipment.com. And last but not least, Adam Lane Smith. He is an attachment specialist who helps people to heal, connect, and build. Use my promo code SHOW, spelled S-H-O-W, for a 50% discount on his attachment bootcamp course. Thank you. All marriages, even the really good ones, need mending. The routine of jobs, kids, chores, and other commitments alone can overshadow romance and passion with any husband and wife. As a result, couples can feel disillusioned or even alone. That is why I've created this marriage series, a platform for husbands and wives to come on and share what they do to be successful. Today, I'm joined with my beautiful wife, Jenny, and our guests, Trey and Lea Morgan. They live in Childress, Texas. They were high school sweethearts that married right out of high school and have been married for 34 years. They have 4 grown sons that age from 33 down to 21. They are actively involved in marriage ministry. He and his wife travel all over the U.S. doing weekend workshops for churches called Stronger Marriage Workshops, blessed to get to speak to thousands yearly about having stronger marriages. They have authored 3 amazing marriage books. 2 have become bestsellers. Much of their marriage coaching comes through their social media sites that they have 500,000 followers. Man, that's big. They also have a bi-weekly podcast called the Stronger Marriage Podcast. Once again, thank you guys for joining us.
Thank you so much for having us. It is an honor to be here.
We appreciate it very much. Excited about our hour we're going to get to spend together visiting about marriage.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, without further ado, I just want to ask you guys, like we always ask all our guests, how was your expectations of marriage before you got married, and how did that really change? Like, what was your expectations of it?
I think for me, I grew up with a great, my parents set a great model of marriage for me, of just being each other's companions and raising children together. And they had a healthy relationship. And I think as far as that's what I wanted in a relationship when I got married, was somebody to share my life with, somebody to raise kids with, and we discussed that. We both wanted children. But I think as far as detailed expectations go, we didn't get very detailed, with that. And so, of course, there was some growing pains in those first couple of years because of, unmet expectations that we just didn't quite, get into the nitty gritty of what we expected from each other.
Yeah, I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that we were both very, very young. We had dated for 4 years. And when it kind of became legal to get married, we got married. And so I think our expectations at the time were, I loved her, she loved me, we want to do life together and build a family together, and we have no clue what to expect. I think had we married at later in our 20s, we might have come into marriage with a little bit of different idea or mindset. But I think part of it was the fact that we were so young that we just knew we wanted to be together. We just couldn't imagine doing life apart. I didn't want to do life without her. She didn't want to do life without me. So that was one of the reasons we decided at a young age, with our parents' permission, none of them were mad at us, that we wanted to get married and let's start this life and go. And we did. And as Lee said, there was a lot of growing pains. We were both very immature, and just had a lot of things to work through. And we're so glad we did, because we worked through some things that I know probably some other couples might have given up on, and we're reaping the benefits of some really good times in marriage right now because we didn't give up in the tough times.
Yeah. Giving up really was never an option for us. We just didn't ever let that be an option, but there were definitely some growing pains.
Yeah.
I think it's always so interesting to hear these amazing stories about couples that got married at a young age. I heard somewhere a statistic saying that couples that get married younger actually learn to problem solve together as a couple earlier on, rather than couples that get married later on in life. They've learned how to be very independent, and so they gravitate towards the independency as opposed to relying on their spouse to help them, and them growing together to make those changes and to problem solve the big issues in life.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. It really does, because we probably weren't even finished growing up, and we kind of just grew up together in those early years.
There were a lot of things. I think there are definitely some pros to marrying early. There's obviously some cons too. But I think both ways. The interesting thing is, in the late 80s, when we got married, the average age was 20 and 22. Women married at 20 and men at 22. Now it is, at least about a year ago when we looked, it was 28 and 26. And so people are marrying later in life, and so many of them already have so many foundations set. They know their likes, their dislikes, how they want to do things. And we kind of went into marriage not knowing what we wanted. We just kind of did it together because we were young at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I definitely see that too, because I'm 6 years older than my wife, Jenny. And at that age, I was already ready to settle down. Okay. I'd already been in the military. I had started school and stuff like that. And she was 21, right?
Yeah, but you met me straight out of high school.
Yeah, I met her straight out of high school. So
I was brand new into the world.
But I definitely see, that was one of our biggest arguments that we had in our early marriage was I got to live my life, and she was just barely starting, you know what I mean? And she didn't get, her age at 21. Granted, we were in the world at the time. We weren't believers at all. So she hadn't got the opportunity to go to like bars and stuff like that at 21, and that was, something that she wanted to have the experience, you know what I mean? And I was like, I'm already over it. We're going to have a family, so it's a big, miscommunication there. So,
yeah, it was, we definitely had some hurdles too, but because we got pregnant so early after we got married, I really felt that pressure more of having to go into the family life as opposed to still being young, being married, and not having children. Did you all start a family really early on in your marriage as well, or did you wait?
We did. Yes, on our first anniversary, I believe I was about 6 weeks away from our first child. So
wow.
Yeah, we started early.
Yeah, we had kind of planned on 4 or 5 years and then have children, and God had other plans. And so it worked that way, and we wouldn't change now. We wouldn't change any of it, but it definitely put strain on a young couple.
Yeah. What are some of the things that people can, if they're in that position right now, what are some coping mechanisms that a couple can do to still enjoy life, having a family so young?
I think there's several things. I think one is you rely on, you're a teammate now. You've got a teammate in life. And so it's not just, her raising kids or him doing this. It's, hey, how can we work at this as a team? And what can we do to remember that we're not just mom and dad anymore. We're also husband and wife still. And so one of the things that we did early that we tried really hard to do, and we encourage other couples to do, is don't just turn into mom and dad. It's easy to take off the husband wife hat and put on the mom and dad hat when the kids come and just solely become parents. And that's really unhealthy, both for your marriage and for your kids, believe it or not. Yeah. And so we still tried at a young age to date on a weekly or bi-weekly basis. We still tried to be very affectionate. We tried to put the kids to bed at an early time so we could have time together for just us. We didn't want to just be parents. We still wanted to be Trey and Lea, and we still wanted to be married. And we found that to be very beneficial. And again, it was good for us. It was also good for our kids, because our kids needed to see that marriage was important to us, and that we loved each other, and that we, were affectionate with one another. We wanted to go on dates because even though we had spent time with them, we were also a husband and wife. And so that was very good for our kids to see that.
That's awesome. I wish that when we got married at a young age, we had like a lot of support from our family to be able to go and do those things. We kind of moved further away from our family, so we just relied on each other. And then he started a career where he was out of town a lot. So it was definitely interesting.
Yeah, it was definitely an interesting dynamic. And then especially if you grew up in a broken home or something like that, that type of trauma plays into that trauma, and it's just kind of a recipe, you know what I mean? And that's undealt with. So
yeah. And I think it's great that young couples can learn from people that have gone through it, how to do it right, get that support, do those date nights. Those are so important.
They are.
Yeah, because you have to remember how to have fun, right? You have to remember how to have fun together. I think having fun together really knits your relationship together in a way that reminds you it's not all about the responsibility. It's not all about the I'm just getting through this day survival mode type of stuff.
Yeah. And one thing that young couples forget sometimes, and I know it seems so far away when you have toddlers or babies, is there's going to come a time when they'll leave home. Those babies are going to grow up someday, and it's going to actually be quicker than you think. And you don't want to go into empty nest not having been husband and wife, and only having been for the last 20 something years just mom and dad, because there is a spike in the divorce rate during empty nest, because a lot of couples have not been husband and wife. They've been mom and dad, and the kids finally leave, and they're home together, and they're like, I don't know you, and I don't know you, and it's real uncomfortable. It's very awkward. And personally, we are 3 years empty nesters. And it is incredible. We are loving empty nest. If I could go back and tell that 22 and 24-year-old couple, hey, I would say it's coming. Hang in there, be patient, because someday you love your kids. You're glad when they come home, but you're also glad to see them doing life on their own, because that's your job as a parent. Raise those kids to where they go off and fly, and they come home and see you, and then they leave again, which is wonderful. And you still have time to be husband and wife, and it's like a second honeymoon. It's good stuff.
That's awesome. Okay, so you guys meet early on in life, then you get married straight out of high school. You start a family real young. What led you to do the work that you do today with Stronger Marriages?
Am I talking on? I talk last, so it's kind of your turn, but it wasn't anything we were specifically looking for. Now, just so you know, and for those who are listening, Lea and I are both in full-time ministry. I am a senior minister. Lea is actually a children's minister at the same church. And so we have been in ministry since we were early 20s in full-time ministry. In ministry, one of the things that we both loved was early as a young couple, we loved going to retreats. We loved going to marriage workshops. We read marriage books together because we wanted our marriage to be successful. And we were so glad that we went. And then we kind of got passionate about it. And we would teach marriage classes. We would have a marriage Bible study in our home. And we would enjoy that. And then maybe 14, 15 years ago, we've had churches that would call me and they would go, Trey, come do a marriage retreat for us. Lea, I'm the extrovert, Lee's an introvert. And so she'd come along as moral support, and we would go do a marriage retreat for some couples at a church. Well, before you knew it, there were some more churches that were calling. And then before you knew it, I actually told Lea, I said, I think we could turn our little marriage retreat into more of a weekend workshop, a boot camp, if you want to call it, for couples. This was probably 12 years ago. And we didn't go looking for it. It's just kind of like we just had people that called and said, would you come to Dallas and do one? And we were at your Dallas conference and we live in Oklahoma City. Would you come to Oklahoma? So God was the one. Honestly, people goes, how do you get into this? God was the one that opened all the doors to this. We give him full credit, and until he shuts the doors, we're going to keep running through it. We simply pretty much in our workshops kind of tell you what we did wrong, don't do that, and some things that we did right that worked well for us. And so that's kind of how we got going. And now we do a workshop a month. Again, we're in full-time ministry, so we only have time to do about one a month. And we're headed to Oklahoma this coming weekend and Casper, Wyoming next month. But we've done over 100, and we're actually booked about 3 years out right now on our schedule. And so we generally have churches that host us, churches that will call us and say, hey, use our facilities on Fridays and Saturdays. We have nothing going on. And that's kind of how we decide where we're going to go do a workshop. Is the church will go, we're going to bring you in, all the community and area shows up, big group of folks. And it's, our belief is that really God wants churches to be a voice for healthy marriages, and to be kind of an instrumental and help get the word out. And if that's marriage conferences, marriage classes, marriage lessons, whatever it is, then it needs to get done. But that's kind of how we got into it. It was all an accident. We didn't go looking for any of it. And so now we feel like we do full-time ministry with what we've always done, and we feel like God's given us kind of a second ministry of marriage ministry.
That's awesome.
That is awesome. I see the same thing too. With us, I understand that sometimes our mess is our message. And my old man used to always tell me, he's like, learn from other people's mistakes, and I think if we can take our mess, turn it into a message, and help others not have to go through the things that we went through, I think it's powerful. And I think people are really open and receptive to hear that, versus someone telling you word for word, oh, this, you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do this. They want to see life real, stuff that's happening to people, and I think that's why your ministry is actually taking off, is, because it's God inspired, for one, and number two, it's real,
Yeah. And we feel that way. We have a lot of couples that either come to our workshops or even on social media. We have a lot of followers on social media, and they'll ask us sometimes, where did y'all get your material? It seems very fresh, very new, and very contemporary. And we're like, it's 2,000 years old. It's basically it's biblical principles that God designed marriage to be. And we're not telling you anything that hadn't been told forever and ever.
Yeah, that's so interesting that you say that it's 2,000 years old, but when you really put it into perspective, a lot of these principles are just, they're the basics of what God has taught us of how to be in marriage and things like that. And they really haven't changed very much through the years, although culture and society keep saying, oh, you've got to change and move and be fluid. And, that's for back then, and that doesn't apply to today. But I don't foresee that that's the truth when it comes to marriage. God designed it one way, and it should function in the way that he designed it. Right? What are some of the ways that you have overcome attacks in your marriage? Because I know that with ministry, and anytime we deal in spiritual areas, when we're called to a certain thing, sometimes we do get attacked during that path that we're on. What are some ways that you together overcome those attacks in your marriage?
I think that communication is always a key. We've got to be in constant communication about expectations, like we talked about earlier, because if we just let, one little thing fester, it gets bigger and bigger. And that's what Satan wants, and that may be all it takes for him to attack us, is that if, just one little thing that we let fester. So we try to stay on top of things and communicate, apologize, forgive each other. We always say forgiveness is huge in marriage. I'm going to need it daily. He's going to need it daily. And so, that's one of the things.
And I think the other thing that we do, and we I don't know that we do well, but we are very intentional with it is we look at our marriage, we think we have a very, very good marriage, a very strong marriage, yet we don't take that for granted. We know that we've still got to work on this. We also know that we're still very vulnerable, that Satan would love nothing more than to take us out. And we have to be paying attention. We have to be alert. We would never say, you will never hear us go, hey, that would never happen to us. Because the first time we begin to let our guard down about marriage, that, hey, those things wouldn't happen to us. We've given him an inch, and he's going to try and take a whole lot more. And so anytime that we get comfortable in marriage going, hey, we won't ever do that, or that wouldn't happen to us, you better be on guard, because he's going to do everything he can with your pride, with our, whatever it is, not paying attention, to try to wedge us, to get us a little bit in there, because we just got to be alert. And we hear couples sometimes go, we would never, we'd never allow ourselves to do what that couple did. And I'm like, hey, no marriage is not susceptible to temptation. So don't you ever let your guard down, ever. It's just so important to us that we pray regularly when we have our prayer time together. Protect us, help us pay attention to the enemy and what he's trying to do to us. Give us a border of protection so that we can continue to be a voice and an outreach to people. But we just don't want to take for granted that, hey, he can't get us, because when we do, we're in trouble.
No, I agree too. That's a certain level of pride. The Bible talks about how pride comes before a fall. And definitely when you're saying that this can't happen to us, that's a level of pride. I know we experienced that when we were asked to step into a role for marriage classes, right? And it was funny because before one of our greatest attacks that we had on our own family, we had just told each other, man, our marriage is actually pretty awesome. This is doing really good. We're in a good place, And then little did we know, you know what I mean, we're going to get attacked because we got complacent, and things happen. So
I think it's great, Lee, that the first thing that came to your mind was staying on top of things and communication, because I really truly believe that it's the little seeds that grow into the big weeds, right? And I've experienced that in my own life and in our marriage, where those little seeds of offense take root and they become resentment that eventually just like poisons you. And it's difficult to see the good in your marriage once you've reached that point. And resentment can really just eat away at the fibers of a marriage. It can really it can eat away even at the fibers of who you are as a person, to the point where you become this person that you don't recognize, and you can even betray yourself in those moments of resentment, which is really detrimental, not only for the marriage, but also for your own position and the standard that you have for yourself in living. So I love that was the first thing that came to mind for you, because so often we see couples will just kind of brush things under the rug, or oftentimes I hear men that, and it's on both sides, but I mostly hear it from men where they're like, my wife wants to keep bringing up the past. And to me, that's a clue that there's something unresolved there. If somebody keeps bringing up the past because there's great hurt, they haven't processed it, they haven't resolved it, and you definitely need to work through those things. And it can be very difficult. What are some tools that people can use to work through some of these harder topics that might be difficult to talk about?
We tell couples all the time. I mean, you mentioned pride, and a lot of couples just like, they won't even attend a workshop because they think, there's this stigma that says workshops are only for couples that are having trouble. And, that's not the case, because we preach that if you work on your marriage in the good times, there's going to be less bad times. So, being proactive in your marriage is one of the best things you can do.
I find it interesting. I'm not
Yeah,
trying. Can I
yeah,
pause you right there
yes.
for a sec? I find it interesting that the majority of the couples that come to our workshops are couples with really good marriages. That tells me they know what they need to do to keep their marriage strong. That was, it's very eye-opening when you look around and you see all these really healthy marriages at a workshop. And it's just kind of like, I wish people really struggling would see what it takes to have a good marriage. You want to work on it even when things are going good.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. So, intentionality is just, I don't know, it's just my favorite thing to talk about, is that we have to be intentional every day at improving our marriage. We can't just put it on cruise control and expect it to be okay. You've got to always be working on it, working to improve it. And there may come those times and those topics that are really touchy and hard to discuss. And we encourage couples to get help if it's just something that you just can't quite seem to come to an agreement on, or that you really just can't even sit down and discuss without arguing about it or whatever it is. Don't let pride come in the way of that. Seek some outside counseling, seek a mentor that can help you work through, somebody else that maybe has been through the same thing. Like you said, your mess has become your message. There are other people out there that you can turn to that have worked through that issue that can help you. So that's what we would encourage couples to do.
Keep talking, keep communicating. One of the things that men are bad about going, that they would love, let's hear what you got, tell me, and I'll do better, and then don't bring it up anymore. And so men are sometimes really bad about not taking an issue serious, and they can't understand why their wife is bringing it back up. Two things here is, one, men, if you're going to say I'm going to do better, then you need to do better. You can't keep doing the same thing and wonder why she's bringing it up. The second thing that you have to understand is a lot of times with wives are really, sometimes wives are very intuitive. Lee picks up on little things about me that I'll think, how did you know this? And she said, I just read it, your body language or your face, or I kind of read between. Men aren't that way. Men don't read dots. People go, wait, I just connected the dots. You can't get, for most men, you can't get the dots close enough for us to connect. dropping hints and trying to get them to connect dots doesn't work for most men. So ladies, what we need is you to shoot straight with us. Don't drop hints. Don't beat around the bush. Sit us down and go, can we have a talk? Then I'll know that that's serious. My wife wants to talk to me. So we'll sit down. We got the kids in bed. What is it that we need to talk about tonight? And then shoot straight. Don't be dropping hints. Tell me what's on your heart. Tell me what I need to do. Tell me what you need from me, whatever it is. And sometimes, most of the time, men will get that. But every now and then you have to tell a man twice. Or sometimes it takes him a little while to remind him, hey, you remember when we had that one talk? Yes, I'm going to do better. I'm going to keep working on that. So it's not a process. You can't flip a switch and just go, I'll do better, and then you do better all the time. Sometimes it does take a little while to get better at that. I've made a lot of huge changes that took time. It wasn't just flipping a switch to where all of a sudden I was a really good husband in this area. Sometimes it took me having to take a step back and be reminded, oh yeah, I got to do better on this. But ladies, one of the best things you can do is be straightforward with us. Talk to us. Don't expect us just to know what you want, what you need, what you're thinking. We need to hear you actually say it.
I like that. I like that. Through your guys' coaching and stuff like that, I heard you guys on a podcast talk about some very bad marriage advice and tips that you should probably not listen to. Can you guys go over that? Because I think that's important for people to understand.
Give us a few bad marriage tips.
Oh, that's been a while. One that comes up is don't go to bed angry.
Yep.
That's one that we kind of disagree with. I mean, sometimes you maybe have an argument, maybe you just can't agree on something. And sometimes it's better to just say, let's just agree to disagree right now. Let's get a good night's sleep instead of just keeping on, hashing this out. And sometimes when you wake up in the morning, you realize that really wasn't a big deal. I mean, sometimes it just resolves itself. And you realize, hey, I made too big of an issue about that last night because I was tired, whatever. I think that's a marriage myth. It's okay to go to bed angry as long as we're not going to just let this anger steep. We're going to work it out tomorrow if it's not resolved by then.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's one that we still hear couples all the time. For us, going to bed at times frustrated with one another worked great because we got up the next morning and it was like that wasn't a big deal at all. Mm-hmm. Another marriage myth that we think that is pretty unhealthy is there's no myth that says absence makes the heart grow fonder. And while we agree with that in a sense that when I've been gone all day and I come back in the evening times, or Lee's been gone all day and she comes home and I hadn't seen her all day, I want to spend time with her and I want to hear about her day and I want to, and that's healthy. But a lot of people use that myth to go, hey, I'm going to take a job that's going to keep me away from my family, a week or two at a time. And then I'll come home for a weekend and then I'll be gone and can we just say that absence is really very hard on marriage? Mm-hmm. Long distance relationships are tough. And so don't ever use the absence makes the heart grow fonder to justify being away from your family when you could be home more often.
Mm-hmm. And I could definitely agree with that 100%, because we lived it, you know what I mean? And a lot of our fan base are traveling linemen, and sometimes they do have to leave their family often, and then some make the choice to take their family with them. Mm-hmm. Either way, it can still be a very difficult choice, like career path to go on and such, but
I think too, now with the level of communication and then social media and stuff like that, you're able to communicate a lot more. So there's really no excuse getting that one-on-one time with your family. When I was on the road, we didn't have as much of that, you know what I mean? There was no Zoom or whatever, so it was very difficult,
Yeah. And that's key. That is key. And a lot of couples don't get that. We're apart from each other. Well, you try hard to find time every day before bed to connect with Zoom or with FaceTime, or you connect with that spouse that you're away from. That's just a healthy thing to do. Text when you get opportunities during the day to let them know you're thinking about them.
Mm. But even still, even with that communication, it's hard, especially even on the kids, because when Daddy would come home and he'd be like the weekend dad, I would always say, I'm dating my husband, because we would just have our weekend dates. The kids, it would just kind of mess up and disrupt the whole, scheduling and dynamic that I had created in the home. And then when he would come home, he had very different ideas of how he would do things. And so it can be very hard on a family when one partner is gone regularly. So I completely agree with that being some bad marriage advice. And also to go back to your first one that you had to say, as far as don't go to bed angry, we often hear that in the Christian world, and they mm-hmm. utilize that Bible verse on a regular basis. But we actually found that if you stay up all night arguing just so you don't go to bed angry, sometimes you just turn a molehill into a mountain, and yes. It's not a big deal. And like you said, sometimes you wake up and you roll over and you kiss your husband. You're like, oh my gosh, I love you.
and I'll throw this out there because we actually, in the Christian world, we take that verse out of context. Don't let the sun go down on your anger. And it really is not talking about a married couple who are not getting along. Don't go to bed until you figure this out. That is not the context of that verse. And so if you're using that verse to go, hey, we can't go to bed until we get this figured out, you've really pulled that verse out of context of what it meant. And that was not what it was written for.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I know one thing that I've often heard amongst people being married and such is, oh, you don't deserve that. When they're trying to get advice from their married friends or whatever, oh, you don't deserve that. And seems to me people are always so quick to want to jump to, you don't deserve that. You deserve better. You should have something better. Whereas they have an idea that if you're married to the right person, then you don't have to work. You don't have to, put in the effort. It's not going to be hard type of thinking. And
soulmate.
Yes, the soulmate.
Yeah, we hear that too. I didn't marry the right person because we've had bad times. And I'm like, who doesn't have bad times? Right. It's not going to be just all, peaches and ice cream when you get married, and you're never going to have a problem at all.
Yeah. Right. it's not always about, did I marry the right person? It's usually more about, I'm going to be the best spouse that I can be. You've made your choice. Now love your choice, kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And do you have any other possible bad marriage advice tips?
I was trying to think. I can't even remember. That was an old podcast, and I can't remember what some of them were. One of the ones that we think is bad marriage advice, or at least there's a lot of, we live in a time in 2023 where people are promoting, don't lose your individuality. And we get that. I mean, there's still things that Lee loves to do, that she'll go shopping with the girls. There's things I like to do with the guys and do my sort of thing. But our goal in marriage is not individuality. Our goal in our marriage is oneness.
Yes.
It is about us becoming so together and so one that when one is happy, the other's happy. When one hurts, the other hurts. And when we finally learned about oneness in marriage and how important it was, we kind of finally got the idea that it's not my money, it's not her money, it's our money. There's no more hers and mine anymore in our marriage. There's no more my phone and your phone. It's our phones. And if you want to use mine, use my phone. It's no longer about, whatever it is. There's just not any more of the, well, that's hers and that's mine. And you can't ask me not to be an individual. We do have our own likes and dislikes, but we choose to depend on one another. And we want to vacation together. We want to spend time together. We want to do things together. And we struggle with couples who go, hey, we don't vacation together. We don't spend time together. I don't know how you can be married if you're not married, spending time with the person that you're married.
No, I agree. And a lot of times we see that with couples that have gotten married later on in life, because they've already developed their own past, their own lifestyles, right? And then when you're trying to mesh those together, it just doesn't click. You have your own style. She has her own style. You know what I mean? And we see a lot of those problems like that in that marriage, in that dynamic,
Yeah, especially if two people have, acquired their own assets and wealth and stuff. It's very difficult for them to blend the two. But in my mind, I'm on board with what you are saying. It's not two individuals, but it's creating a oneness. And your life never really benefits as oneness if you continue to live individually. And not to say that you can't be you're not an individual person, you don't have your individual thoughts and things like that, because yes, every person does, and your individuality actually complements your husband or your spouse's individuality, and you become like a stronger team because you both have these great assets that you bring together to work together. And I do agree that is something I think kind of came with the feministic movement, where it's like, okay, the woman, needs to go and be the girl boss and have her own money and all this stuff. And now we're seeing this split, this rift in families where everybody's trying to do their own thing. And I find it's kind of sad too.
Yeah. Well, you said that well. You explained that whole thing really, really well. And I just want to say amen to that.
Oh, thank you. I did want to say, as I've been listening to you talk about your marriage and all the things you do in your marriage, the word that kept coming to my mind was intentionality. And then you said it time and again as you have been speaking. And I think that's so important for married couples to realize that when you're going into marriage, you shouldn't ever be on autopilot, like what you have repeatedly said. And it's a testament in your guys' marriage. You can clearly see it in all that you guys are talking about and all the tips and stuff. It's very apparent. There has to be a form of intentionality, not only to work on your problems, but to protect your marriage on a regular basis. What are some things that people should be doing that protect their marriage?
We're pretty big on boundaries. There's got to be boundaries in marriage, whether it's with, family members, in-laws, people you work with, friends of the opposite sex especially can cause lots of issues. So set boundaries and stick to them. And if one of you is seeing some red flags, the other partner should take that to heart and not brush them off. You know, if I were to tell Trey, I really think that you're getting too friendly with that coworker, and maybe you don't see it, but I'm seeing some things there. You know, he shouldn't say, "Oh, you're just being silly. You're making a big deal out of nothing." You know, because maybe it is nothing, but it's better to be safe than sorry.
Mm-hmm.
So boundaries are definitely important in marriage.
Yeah. And I think being open, or we always call it being naked with one another. We believe God designed marriage for us to be naked with one another, not just physically, but emotionally, intellectually. That means I'm not hiding anything from Lee. Lee's not hiding anything from me. Mm-hmm. That Lee and I, boundaries that we set that are healthy for us, we share passwords. We actually have a note on our phones that are on both of our phones. If I update something or she updates something, it just goes to each other's phone, it keeps our passwords for all our social media accounts, email, just pretty much everything. Now it's good because we forget our passwords all the time, but it's also because I want her to know she's welcome to get on any of my stuff she ever wants to. I don't know if she does. If she did, great. If she doesn't, I'm okay with that too. But that boundary of knowing that, hey, my wife is allowed to use or look at, she can pick my phone up. She has the code to my phone. And if she wants to pick it up, and if it's closer than her phone and she wants to look up something on YouTube or Google something, she's welcome to use my phone at any time. I'm not hiding anything from her. And when we hear couples go, this is my phone, I have a lock on it, my wife is not allowed, or my husband is not allowed to see what's on my phone or what I'm doing on my phone, that's my own personal area. Every red flag in the world goes up that obviously you're doing something that you probably ought not to be doing on your phone that you don't want your spouse to see. And we see that all the time, and it's sad. But that is one of the big boundaries. Another huge boundary. We talk about this in one of our books. If we text someone of the opposite sex, it is a friend that we're just giving information to. We don't have conversations with the opposite sex about how was your day? What have you been doing? How's things in your marriage? Those are not conversations that I need to be having with other women, that Lee needs to be having with other men. If I have to have a conversation like that, I'll include her in the text message. Welcome to the message, Lee. Guess what? You get a text message, because it just promotes boundaries. We see couples all the time that have had good, solid marriages, and it's literally taking just a few weeks of starting to text someone that's a coworker or someone that's an opposite sex, and they build this little friendship, and before you know it, they're hiding those text messages. They don't want their spouse to see them. They're deleting those. They put a lock on their phone, and we've seen marriages within 2 months go from a great marriage to, I need to ask you to move out because I'm rethinking our relationship. And it's because they've allowed someone else to come into their marriage through a phone, through a text message, through a Facebook Messenger, an Instagram Messenger, a Snapchat. And that's not healthy. You cannot have, there's physical affairs, there's also emotional affairs, and emotional affairs kill just as many marriages as physical affairs. So set some boundaries on social media and on cell phones and on friendships.
Mm-hmm. I absolutely love that you bring up this topic, because in the psychology world, I often hear this trend that just does not sit well with me. But they always say that if your spouse needs to look at your phone, that's not okay. Your phone should be a private space, which I personally don't agree with. I think that if your phone is a private space, that is more or less like saying my phone carries secrets.
Yes. Again, the red flags.
If there is something that you can't share with your spouse, that's a secret. Mm-hmm. It's not private. Privacy is something that, you're dealing with I feel inside of a marriage. And you don't want like your friends to know about. To me, that's like what privacy is. Secrets, I think, are something that you don't want your spouse to find out about. But I think that if you truly are, like what you're saying, living in oneness and have a naked marriage, it shouldn't be hard for your spouse to know who you are.
Mm-hmm.
And to be a part of all of your relationships. Your spouse should be a part of all your relationships. And
True.
David and I do the same thing when it comes to ministry and talking to people of the opposite sex. If somebody reaches out to him, he always defers them to me, that's of the opposite sex. And if he's talking to somebody that they want to bring in, a female, he'll usually bring me in on it, or, just to keep it balanced and make sure that everything is safe and such, because things can happen. And especially in social media, this world has opened up so many problems for marriages, and you hear the word Facebook in so many divorce papers. I think they're saying like 80% nowadays.
Yeah.
There is like a social media connection to divorces now. So I completely agree with what you're saying as far as phones go and boundaries, and just being intentional about protecting your marriage in that way.
Mm-hmm. I agree, babe. Well said. Also, too, I think a lot of times there's a lot of hurting people out there more than ever, right? And people just want to be heard. If they're not getting that connection with their spouse the way God intended to, they're going to find someone that they could connect to.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times the person that they're connecting to is having issues themselves. So it's almost like a magnet. They're drawing to each other. You know what I mean? And in the end, it could be detrimental,
Yeah. If you're talking to someone of the opposite sex about your marriage problems, you are headed down the wrong path. And that is like the number one indicator of how did this affair start? Well, I was just talking to them about the marriage problems that I have. I thought because they were the opposite sex that they would understand what I was, they were a friend of my husband's, or they're a friend of my wife's. Don't do that. That is just an unhealthy road to go down.
Yeah. And in today's culture, there's such a like a grandiose romanticism around affairs, like what you see in Hollywood and things like that. And culturally, it's almost like they're trying to make it more acceptable, and like the polygamy lifestyle, when it's really just very destructive. It's very destructive to children, to families, to everybody. I mean, it goes on and on. So it's better to be safe than sorry, and just protect your marriage and work on what you have.
True.
I wanted to ask you guys, what does the future of the traditional family look like, say, in the next 20 years? What do you guys see projecting?
That's a good question.
Well, I think families today are looking for that. And what I mean is, I think because we live in such an information society with Google and social media, I think families are trying to figure out, how do I do marriage and how do I do family? Mm-hmm. And I think the key is going to be finding your information in the right place, because there's a lot of bad information out there.
Yes.
And if you can find your information in the right place, and we go back to why churches need to be so involved in allowing, hey, come in and bring a marriage workshop, bring a marriage boot camp, we're going to do a marriage retreat, is because couples are looking, and some of them are looking toward Hollywood, and a lot of Hollywood doesn't have the right answers. And the key is going to be in the direction of the family, is where they find their information from. And if we can get the message out about healthy marriages and how to do marriage in a healthy way, it will bless those future kids and future generations to come. If you build a marriage that everybody wants to build, which is a strong, healthy marriage, Lee and I are going to look back when we're 80 and go, it has blessed us, and we're so glad we put in the work. But it's also going to have blessed our kids, and it's going to have blessed our grandkids. It's going to be so much more. That sphere of influence is going to be so much more than just of us. Our kids and our grandkids will reap the benefits of the effort that we've put in.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I definitely, being somebody that came from a divorced family, and then being in a stable marriage, I can see how much it affected me as a child, and it still affects me even today as an adult. There is not a stability like what my husband has because his parents are still married. We know that we can always go to his parents' house for holidays, things like that. It's always stable, it's consistent. There's always that, reliability, so to speak. Whereas with my family, me and my sister and my brother at times, we would have to stand up and kind of be like the stability in the marriage. So I know that, and it's not to shame anybody that's had a divorce, because I understand that things happen, but when you divorce, you still have the same issues usually come up in the next marriage because you haven't learned how to work through the problems that created the divorce in the first place, because you just separated in that situation. And I know that there are some situations where you have to make that decision for safety reasons. But if you can really just push through and both people want to work it out, that is just going to benefit each person individually too in the future for, years to come, not only just in the marriage, but I mean, you as a person, you find healing when you work out problems.
And what a message is that showing to our children too. I mean, it's showing how to, that your parents aren't perfect, right? And also that your parents are working through problems, a lot of problem solving skills. I think nowadays a lot of people complain that, there's no one has common sense nowadays, right? And I think a lot of times that's because they haven't seen their own parents navigate through problems. Parents aren't showing their kids how to handle problems in a healthy, productive way. So these kids grow up and they have no idea. They don't know how to solve problems at all. You know what I mean? And I see that a lot, even in our industry. So,
yeah. And I can see the result in our kids too, like just knowing that we weren't perfect and now we're starting to parent a lot better and we're starting to do marriage a lot better, but you can see the difference in them and how much it's healing them too, just by us rectifying our own situation.
Yeah, you just hit the nail on the head, because your children are in your school of marriage.
Yes.
They're learning how to do marriage by watching you. Whether it's for good or for bad. That's how, when they get married, they're likely going to carry that on. And so we want to be teaching our children, healthy skills in marriage, like, working through conflict and communicating and loving each other, just being affectionate with each other. So yes, our children are definitely learning how to do marriage by watching us.
That's a great term. Yeah. The school of marriage. I love that. That just describes it so well. I have one last question, because we're getting close to wrapping it up, right? For couples that are really in a place where they have experienced a lot of pain from each other, but they still love each other and they don't want to separate in their marriage, or they might be considering divorce because they can't get over the pain, what are some steps that they can take to start moving in the right direction?
I would say reach out and find some outside help would be the first thing to do. Find a Christian marriage counselor, a marriage coach, somebody that could give them some direction. The other thing that I think would be really important for them to do is to remember that while we don't like conflict, and conflict is not fun, to get back to the area that came before conflict, sometimes we have to go back through conflict. And so if I want my marriage to get better, if I want my spouse to do something that I feel like they're not doing, I can either learn to live with it, which I don't want to do, or I can bring it up, and there's probably going to be conflict, but I should be okay with that if I know that this is going to make us better. Lee and I know that there's going to be times where we have some conflict, but we both know we're still, even in conflict, we are on the same team. We want to get better. We want to improve. We want to become closer as a couple. And sometimes we have to have a little conflict in order to get to a better place. So don't fear the conflict. Don't sweep things under the rug to go, well, I don't want us to be mad at each other or frustrated with each other. Learn to have conflict without being mad at each other, but understand conflict. If you had to go through conflict to get to a bad spot, you're probably going to have to go back through that conflict in order to get back to a good spot.
Yeah, that's so good. Man, at our church yesterday, we had an amazing speaker, and he said something that was just so impactful to me. And I feel that it really goes hand in hand with what you're saying. He said, sometimes your spouse doesn't know how to articulate what they're feeling. So you have to give them space to be able to say things messy in the beginning.
That's good.
And sometimes I feel we can be in a position of offense in such a way that when somebody says something messy in the beginning because they're trying to articulate their feelings, we don't give them the space because we're instantly offended. Whereas, just allowing somebody to talk for a time and you just having the self-control to hold your tongue can really go a long way. So I love that you say.
Very good.
Yeah,
that is very, very good.
Not being afraid of conflict is so important. I agree.
Yeah, absolutely. But you also got to create that safe space too.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You got to be able to know that, hey, it's okay to come to my spouse with this. Yeah, they might get upset and everything like that. They're probably going to be triggered, but I mean, if it turns violent, I mean, that's not, you're not going to want to open up to them. You know what I mean?
Right.
Then you definitely need someone to come in and start talking for you guys and try to mitigate it. That's that help that he was talking about. So.
Yes, definitely. Yes. If you can't communicate properly to each other, you definitely need to reach out for help. I completely agree.
Well, Trey and Lea, thank you so much for coming on. Is there any way that our guests or our audience can get a hold of you? If you'd like to share that right now, that'd be amazing. And we appreciate that.
We have a landing page that is treyandlea.com. TREYANDLEA.com. And that will take you to every one of our resources. All of our social media accounts, our books and how to order those. You can email us there.
Upcoming events of where we're going to be all
yes.
over the U.S. is there. Everything. What do you expect in one of our workshops? If we show up, what did we do? It's all there. And you can read all about it and learn. And we would love to have couples come hang out with us. And we think our marriage workshop is a great, just kind of boost in the arm to get couples out there to go, we can do this. We've got this.
That's awesome. So you guys hear it first on this podcast. If you need help, you don't know where to turn, I would definitely start with Stronger Marriages. Check out Trey and Lea and get started on creating a stronger marriage.
Right on, man. Thank you guys for coming on, and we appreciate you, and we'll be talking to you guys soon.
Honored to be here. Thank
you
you.
so much.